direct me to the Grand Central Station?
Gotta get a cab right away. I'm gonna be late.
I'm looking for the wallet.
Hi, open up a dozen. What you trying to do? Charge your batteries? Make it 2. Easy, girl. It'll blow a fuse if you keep that up. Why don't you bring me a good ladder, one with lots of money, and I can make use of it. Attaboy, attaboy.
What makes Williams such a great poet is that he does speak about and to ordinary people.
Why is any great poet a great poet? A great poet is one who makes a difference to the art of poetry. I think it's as simple as that. And he made more difference to American poetry than anyone other than Walt Whitman.
In Williams's autobiography, in its foreword, he tips us off as to his own nature, the role of Eros in his writing, the role of frankness and candor. He says, I am extremely sexual in my desires. I carry them everywhere and at all times. I think that from that arises the drive which empowers us all.
For my part, I was expecting to meet a doctor. I'd heard from Pound that Williams was a baby doctor, a pediatrician. And that I saw immediately was true, because the little house where he lived in Ridge Road, there was a sign, W.C. Williams, M.D., and there was his wife fetched him out of the office to see me when I called, and it was clear that he was an authentic doctor.
And I remember after we'd leave some of those apartment houses, we'd be going down those stairs, and he'd say, did you hear this? Did you hear that? Or we'd get into that car of his, and he'd scribble little words, and I'd say, what is he doing? And at times you'd feel this man is just too much, as we put it these days, too much. Well, he was too much, but he never missed a trick, and all that stuff would come home, either in his head or in pieces of paper, and we know what happened in the evening. It assembled.
I'm an artist, if I am anything at all, and so I take the American language as I find it. No one believes that poetry can exist in his own life, but everything in our lives, if it's sufficiently authentic to our lives and touches us deeply enough, is capable of being organized into a form which can be a poem.
Between 1900 and World War I, which to me is the key period. So let's say when Williams was about 20 years old, you have the invention of not only the airplane and that the automobile really became ubiquitous. You had high-speed trains. You had the Marconi radio. You had, for the first time, the possibility of beaming radio beams around the world. Therefore, you could simultaneously be in 2 places at once. It just means that the world probably changed more quickly at the beginning of the century, certainly than since. I don't think we've had in the 20th century anything like the kind of acceleration that you have in the years before 1914. It's just an amazing period. Now, how does that affect a poet like Williams? The sheer technology is everywhere in his work, beginning with the typewriter. If you compose on the typewriter, you're obviously going to perceive very differently than if you write by hand. The look on the page becomes very, very important. But it's not only the look on the page, it's the whole feel of short, fast movement.
One thing that Williams is trying to do is make the making of poems seem like an American activity. Americans have no problems with spending their lives putting machines together. Detroit was founded on that premise. He saw no reason why you couldn't think of putting poems together in the same way. His habit of typing and retyping is connected with his idea that the poem is a thing made. It is made out of small parts. It is made out of lines. It is made out of phrases. He would retype sometimes the same words 5 or 6 times, the difference being that he broke the lines in different places, and he needed to live with it a while to decide if it was right or not, and he would decide it wasn't right, and he would retype it again with a word that had been at the end of a line moved to the beginning of the next line, and then he would live with that for a while.
It's what you do with the work of art. It's what you put on the canvas and how you put it on that makes the picture. It's how the words fit in. Poems are not made of thoughts, beautiful thoughts. It's made of words, pigments, put on. Here, there, made, actually.
First of all, you cannot imagine anybody saying that. You cannot imagine it being said. The second thing is you cannot devise a way to say it that sounds plausible.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with red...
Wait a minute. So much depends upon a red wheel blow glass with rain, water beside the white chickens.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rain, water beside the white chickens.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rain, water beside the white chickens.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. Right?
For a page is a visual object, and the way it sits on the page does not necessarily tell you anything about how to read it. You particularly don't pause at the ends of the lines to indicate where the lines end, because if you do that, you disrupt it totally. It's not like Shakespeare, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate, where the lines are the units of thought, and you pause after them. They're the units of utterance. The Williams line is not a unit of utterance. The unit of utterance sometimes runs all the way down the page.
There was, I think, definitely this split in Williams's life. He was devoted to his wife Flossie and his family as the two boys came along, but at the same time there was always this urge to have a little liberation from the climate of middle-class Rutherford. So he struck a kind of compromise. He had his life in Rutherford, but he would also go into New York Friday evenings or weekends, and there he could meet with writers and a lot of artists, people such as the painters Charles Demuth and Marston Hartley and Charles Sheeler. Williams also met the poets who were circled around Others magazine, and they helped him a lot to modernize his poetry, you see, because when he first met them, he was writing Keatsian poetry.
Williams' first book, Poems, 1909, of which only 100 copies were printed, is written in the dominant genteel style of the period. I think it's very important to know what that style was, just to see how rapidly and amazingly Williams moved away from that style. Sweet lady, sure it seems 1,000 years since last you honored me with gentle speech. Yet when forsaking fantasy I reach with memory's index or the stretching tears of minutes wasted counting, as who fears strict chiding reason, lest it should impeach all utterance must, a mighty gaping breach twixt truth and seeming verity appears. Now, you see how contorted the syntax is there? The sentences are so long you lose track of them as I'm reading them out loud. They're all convoluted. They're inverted with clauses coming first and subordinate clauses, the kind of thing Williams never did later. This was the going style in America in 1909.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens.
He clearly remade himself, and there were really no examples that Williams could turn to, or at least very few examples. I think the art world became his example out of lack of other examples.
Because Williams was interested in the visual arts. After all, he painted his self-portrait the following year. He did visit the 1913 Armory Show, and he did indeed see Duchamp's scandalous nude descending a staircase. Americans, when they thought about art, if they did indeed think about art at all, thought that art should be instructive, that it should instruct us in the highest ideals and motives of life, that art should somehow reflect the purity of life, and it should have perhaps even a religious message. They were not prepared for the sort of art that they saw at the Armory Show. They didn't understand what they were looking at, and I think they were threatened by what they saw.
Williams describes in his autobiography how he went and just laughed and laughed. Thought it was just wonderful. He saw Cézannes and Picassos and Braques, and he just felt his life had really begun because he realized here was something that was what he wanted to do, namely to deal with words as words, just as these people were dealing with paint as paint and not representing something.
No ideas but in things is his way of insisting on the particular, the concrete, the palpable, that which is there, and refusing to move from that into abstractions that distance one from that kind of everyday concrete life. And you see that constantly in him, not only as the doctor, who obviously is dealing with life's concreteness, but by his shunning of the blandishments of an abstract kind of mind that is all too proud of itself and all too unwilling to keep itself connected to and rooted in life's everydayness.
The theory is that you can make a poem out of anything. You don't have to have conventionally poetic material. Anything that is felt, and that is felt deeply, or deeply enough, or even that gives amusement, is material for art.